Hello, GMAN Division 9, and welcome along to another episode of the whole 9 yards. Looking back on week 5 this time. Another good week, another bunch of interesting results. So plenty to get through again in the show. We're going to start, as we always do, with the performance of the week. And again, this could have gone to a couple of teams. But all things said and done, had to award it this week to Aromasin and Sneaky Blinders, because he finally got his first ever Rebel win at the, what would it be, something around the 18th time of asking. A 1-0 win this week against the Sci-Fi Saurai, meaning that Sneaky Blinders finally have a W against their name in the old win column. We'll bring the match report up now for you. There it is. So 1-0 win for Aromasin's Underworld team against Cthulhu Collector's Lizards. It wasn't the most deadly match you've ever seen. No deaths for either side. Just a couple of badly hurts here and there. And it's good to see the Underworld finally get a win. It's interestingly actually pushed them quite far up the table. From what was obviously when they've drawn every single game, they're right down in the middle, and suddenly one win, you've got an undefeated 1-4-0 start, and things aren't looking too bad all of a sudden for Aromasin. There's still a few teams in the division who are undefeated, but weirdly at the moment, none of those undefeated teams are actually top of the table, because it's a lot of draws coming in for those teams rather than wins. Or, of course, losses, I guess. But yeah, draws keeping them in and around. Certainly doing well to not lose games. Overall, just having a look at the results on Rebel.net. There was a few badly hurt goblins, but nothing untoward for the Underworld, who did manage to control the ball for most of the game, actually. Also managing to surf a player as well. But they suffered 6 knockouts. We were running short on numbers by the end, but managed to hold on for a 1-0 win. Great result for Aromasin. And a well-deserved, you have to say, first victory. Certainly for sticking it out with the team. All right, then here are the rest of your Week 5 results. So, we start with what is actually our first admin result of the season. So, Bloody Mary Queen's getting a 1-0 win over Alan Elfos there. Unsure of the reasons for that. Not sure if Matthew was just unable to make it this week. Hopefully, we're not looking at a drop from the division here, because we've done well for that sort of thing so far. Hack, Slash and Mutilate 1, Chosen of Papa Nurgle 1. A very creditable draw for Jonah there, but it wasn't without the odd loss, again, as you might expect going up against that massive Nurgle team. But did manage to get a 1-1 draw, which is a great result for him. And actually, when all is said and done, doubled his points tally for the season. Still looking for that elusive first win, but a good win nonetheless. Sabretooth Vag 3.0 getting a 2-0 win against Erwinder's Requiem there. Another solid result for the Wood Elves, who are motoring along quite nicely now in Division 9. Shock and Gore 2, Hubat 1. The rot is stopped, if you like, for Shock and Gore, so Gruff getting himself back to winning ways. And plenty to talk about regarding his new mummy in that game. As we saw, Sneaky Blinders 1, Sci-Fi Saurai 0. The Big Cups with another win, this time 1-0 against Quiguana. So repeating the trick against the Lizardman team again. This time around, the Dwarfs in great form. And the Boondock Skinks finally getting their first win of the season. A 2-0 victory against the Watch, which was a good result for Moondingo there. Finally getting himself a win on the board and keeping him in that mid-table pack. As we're approaching sort of the middle part of the season now. We're flying through, aren't we? All right, so we will take a closer look at some of these games, and we'll start there with Hack, Slash and Mutilate against Chosen of Papa Nurgle. And unfortunately for Jonah, he might have got a draw, but Hack, Slash and Mutilate were very much hacked, slashed and mutilated by all of Lava Jackal's deadly players. 24 armor breaks for Chosen of Papa Nurgle. Just the 4 there for Jonah, who unfortunately picked up a loner MVP as well. And if you were going to hire it, it took an Agi bust, so probably not, as it turns out. But a fairly scary performance on this Nurgle team, who are just going from strength to strength. They've fairly ridiculous team value for this division now, about 1940 or so at the end of this week. Loads of SPP again for all of the Nurgle Warriors and whatnot. Did manage to get a level for Robert the Brute here on Hack, Slash and Mutilate. That's one of the blitzers. He's taken Dauntless now, so clearly looking to take down that the higher strength players in the division. But look at that, 7 casualties inflicted across this game, 6 KOs as well. Amazing that Jonah was able to hang on for that 1-1 tie. So I've got to say, very, very well played. Almost worthy of the performance of the week there, hanging on for a 1-1 draw, considering the losses he took in that game. And we'll focus a bit more on that in the injury report a little later in the show, as you can probably anticipate based on how that went. Does mean that Chosen and Papa Nurgle are still undefeated at this stage of the season as well. Okay, so moving on to the Wood Elves now. Sabertooth Vibes 3.0 getting a 2-0 win against Erwinder's Requiem. The side two are still struggling for form a little bit, the Undead. They're very much here and there. A win one week, a loss the next week. So you never quite know what you're going to get from them. The proverbial bag of revels, for those who know their certainly UK confectionery. Never quite know what you're going to pull out of the packet. But a good win for MB Carmack, who, as I say, is motoring along quite nicely now towards the top end of the division. Here's the breakdown of the result. 16 armor breaks for Erwinder's Requiem, who get a very useful MVP on Luke Costello as we try to push him towards another level. No idea what he'll take. Block, guard, stand firm, and dodge proven to be a very useful mummy indeed. So, what you might take beyond that, he's already got Mighty Blow, of course. So, we shall see what Erwinder's plans are for that, but he's got a few SPP to go to get there yet. Doommaster War Dancer with Tackle getting the MVP as well, which motors him along very nicely towards another level, which is exactly what MB Carmack will want. Good SPP as well for the Wood Elves. A total of 14 coming in there. Erwinder did lose another rookie ghoul in this game, which is a shame for him, but all of his SPP coming from casualties, including one from the ghoul there, Charles-Francois Teppers. But overall, I think plenty of ball possession for the Wood Elves. It looks like Erwinder was never really able to get a hold of the ball in the game and not able to do enough damage to cause MB Carmack any particular issues. So a good win for the Wood Elves this week. Okay, Shock and Gore with a 2-1 win over Hubat, who again, still, you never quite know what you're going to get from the Vampires, but that's kind of to be expected with a Vampire team, really. But after a couple of difficult weeks, Gruff gets himself a victory, and again keeps him right in the middle pack of the table here. 17 armor breaks coming from the Vampires here, so a hell of a lot of damage coming out of Hubat, but unfortunately not enough to win the game. Presumably Shock and Gore's regen helping them out there. But the headline act, you have to say, is 6 SPP for the rookie mummy here, Ammon Emhat, who we'll have a look at again later in the show. But we mentioned the fact that he had some nice armor value 7 pieces to hit in all the throws that weren't necessarily the easiest pieces to dodge away. And Gruff has taken full advantage, managing to level the mummy after just one game. There was also 3 levels for thralls in this game, which was interesting. Hubat getting an MVP on 1 there, but he did take a movement bust, which is unfortunate for Tanek Goran there. But did manage to level a couple of other thralls over the course of the game as well, for good measure, including the guard thrall, so he'll have presumably picked up block by this point. And one of the rookies there, you can see Goran Yushchenko got a casualty to give himself a level as well. So a little bit more development for Hubat, which is of course good news for the Vampires. We saw, of course, Sneaky Blinders with a 1-0 win over Sci-Fi Sarai, so we've already had a look at that game. Doesn't mean we can move on to the division leaders now. The big cups, the Dwarfs, Juvasak's team, are absolutely flying. And it is 3 wins on the spin now for them. They picked up another 1-0 win over a Lizardman team. This week it was Quiguanas. So a very, very low bloodshed match, if that makes sense. Just the 1 casualty suffered from a dwarf in terms of Quiguanas. There was another casualty suffered presumably to the floor. Something fell over. But 7 KOs in the game for the Lizards, which from only 9 armor breaks, 4 of them inflicted by the Dwarfs, 3 of them probably inflicted on failed dodges or the like. But that's not very many for either side, considering the number of blocks that were thrown. 60 blocks turning into just 1 KO from Quiguanas is a very frustrating return on your investment there. This isn't much better, to be fair, but the Dwarfs completely in control of the game with 75% ball possession compared to Quiguana's 6. And it looks like it was never really in doubt for Juvasak, this one, who marches on at the top of the table. Another good win for him. Okay, final result of the week is, of course, a first win for the Boondock Skinks. So we do get 1 win for Lizard Man team, and that was a 2-0 victory for them over the Watch. It was all going so well for the Watch, wasn't it? We've talked about this earlier in the season where Gruff was the early division leader, and then the Watch took over that mantle. And ever since the Watch took the lead, they've now lost the last 2 games and have slipped right back down into the midfield section, which is a shame for them. Just unable to cause any damage to the Boondock Skinks, and Moondingo able to run away with this one. A 2-0 win, great result for him. He's only lost the 1 game so far this season, so a 1-3-1 record. Nice and symmetrical, but able to cause 4 casualties against the Orcs, including a couple of perms as well, which we're going to have a look at later in the show. But overall, a good result for the Boondock Skinks, and an opportunity to have a look at the player of the week, of course, and that goes this week to Romeo, who is the sure hand skink playing for the Boondock Skinks, who managed to score both the touchdowns in this 2-0 win. There's actually 3 players that managed to get themselves up to 6 SPP without taking MVPs this week, including this skink and the Mummy on Gruff's team that I mentioned before. On the tiebreak, handed it to the player who scored 2 touchdowns to win his team the game. Seemed like the fairest way to do it. So congratulations to Moondingo, who picks up a win, or his first win of the season, and the Player of the Week award to boot. So Romeo there is now just 4 SPP away from another level on that sure hand sidestep skink. If you could roll if you could roll another double and get a hold of block on that thing, you've got yourself a very nice skink indeed. All right, and speaking of that injury report, we're going to move straight onto it. And it was not a nice week, as we predicted. It might not be for Hack, Slash and Mutilate. And really, we're not going to look at any one player here. We're just going to look at the state of the team, because they have now been reduced to a paltry 1060 TV this week. Braveheart is missed next game. The Ogre Hacksaw is also missed next game there. And we've got a missed next game on a lineman here as well. So the team down to just 1060 team value, as we expected they might be after this. I think everyone who goes up against that Nurgle team is going to come out with some casualties. That is for sure. But nothing died, which is good. So we'll lose a few players for a week. But beyond that, we're not looking too bad. The only permanent injury was actually an agility bust for the loner. So Hack, Slash and Mutilate were knocked from pillar to post, suffered 6 KOs and 9 casualties in the game. But luckily enough for Jonah, no deaths. So he can recover from these MNGs this week. It'll be a tough week for him without his Ogre and one of his blitzers there. But for the following week, he'll be back to something approaching full strength. And that Nurgle team will be out the way. And of course, he did manage to get a draw from the game. So didn't lose. That makes all these casualties somewhat worth it, you have to say. Okay, next up on this week's injury report, I'm afraid to say it is a player from Cthulhu Collector's team, the Sci-Fi Sauri, who took a loss, of course, to the Underworld this week, and an MNG themselves. Nothing permanent, but they've lost their best lizard, or certainly their best Saurus. So Robert A. Heinlein, winner of the Player of the Week award last week, I believe. No, the week before, sorry. The Block Mighty Blow Tackle Saurus is out of this week's game. And considering Cthulhu Collector finds himself up against an undead team, you're losing a tackle player against those ghouls. It's a big loss. So his week 6 opponent is going to be happy to see that Robert A. Heinlein is on the sideline. But other than that, the team's in pretty good shape. Did manage to get a level on this Saurus for guard and this Saurus for block. So all of the Saurus now possessing block is great news for this Lizardman team, who, as long as it can keep them alive, and remember, of course, that the Nurgle are still on the horizon later on in the season, but if they can keep these guys alive and kicking, the development on this team is coming along quite nicely indeed. Okay, final one this week. We have to go to the watch, I'm afraid, and we've talked about how the wheels have fallen off ever so slightly for Ozzy. I mean, such a good start of the season, didn't he? But over the past couple of weeks, a couple of defeats back-to-back saw him slide down the table, and unfortunately, we're just going to have a look at the whole team because it was 2 dead Black Orcs in the last game. One of them was a mercenary. So he brings in a mercenary Black Orc for the game who promptly dies. And we lost another one as well. One of the block Black Orcs, you'll notice, is now missing from the team. So we've had to replace him. It was, of course, a death for Detritus Jr. there from the watch. He was a block Black Orc, 10 out of 16 SPP. So Black Orcs, of course, notoriously slow to level without that starting Mighty Blow. And plenty of damage caused, mainly from the Croxagore, actually, of the Boondock Skinks. Noah Il Duce picking up 2 casualties. That Croxagore's moved on to 40 SPP now, doing very well indeed. Block guard, stand firm. Otherwise known as a nightmare for an Orc team with no guard whatsoever, with the exception of that lineman there, Cheery Littlebottom. So, urgently, if we can get it, we need some guard on this Orc team. But, of course, losing Black Orcs is not a good idea if you want to do that. But it happens, and we've at least had the money to replace him with the new Detritus here. Detritus regular, as opposed to Detritus Junior. So we can start again on that process of trying to build him up into a very solid player. All right, so moving on to this week's development report. And we are actually sticking with the Watchers' opponents. So the Boondock Skinks, of course, getting their first win of the season. And in the process, managed to level up one of their Saurus, Rocco. Here he is. Would you believe it? It's another Blodge Saurus. We do seem to have plenty of them in GMAN Division 9, don't we? So this one went dodge and then block, of course, rolling that double first. But that's now a very nice player for holding that front line and more often than not getting knocked over. So the Boondock Skinks can really sort of lean on that player quite a bit now and get him tying down certainly other low agility pieces who can't dodge away. And they'll find it very tricky to knock him over as well. Over the course of the whole team, we're still lacking development on a lot of these Saurus. Still a fairly skink-heavy team in terms of inducements. We do have Fend on this one, which is a very interesting pick from just the one level. Rolled a double there and picked Fend, which is an interesting choice. Normally you'd see block as standard on a skink. But he's 1 SPP away from another level, that thing, and if he can pick up Sidestep. Fend Sidestep isn't terrible, actually. It's a decent idea. And we do still have the 1 Mighty Blow Saurus here. So the Boondock Skinks looking okay. And can motor on into week 6. And hopefully pick up another good result. Okay, I think we've sort of hedged around this one quite a lot now. We need to go and talk about Gruff's mummy, don't we? Because he had a monstrous week, did Eminem Hat the Third. 3 casualties on his debut. Look at that. He didn't roll a double, so unfortunately we weren't able to completely replace that block mummy by just leveling him in one game and rolling another double for block. But a guard mummy is not to be trifled with, is it? So look at that on the stats. 1 match, 3 casualties inflicted, and already not quite a like-for-like replacement, but certainly a good enough replacement. Guard on undead teams, we maybe hedged on it or talked about it a little bit earlier in the season, but guard is all important on those mummy teams. They lack natural strength access generally across the board. So wherever you can get it, it is a good thing. So even though he didn't roll a double for block, having that extra guard is certainly not a bad thing at all. And with Mighty Blow, it's only 5 more casualties till his next one, isn't it? And you might pick up a sneaky MVP along the way for good measure. All right, so the final player we're going to talk about this week, I'm afraid, folks, it is not good news for the rest of you, but very good news for Mr. Lava Jackal, who has managed to level another one of his Nurgle warriors. Hooray. I'm sure you're all absolutely delighted. Would you believe it? It has Claw. So we have another block Mighty Blow Claw Nurgle warrior for you all to deal with. And I'm sure 13 of you right now are sitting there going, great. Delighted with that. Lava Jackal, probably sitting there going, great, delighted with that. The more Claw, Mighty Blow you can get. Of course, we don't have all the guard in the world on this team, but guard doesn't really matter if you're removing everything left, right, and centre, does it? So, again, Lava Jackal will be delighted to see that Mighty Blow coming good and able to level Vorgarak the Victorious there. And the Chosen of Papanurgle going properly from strength to strength now. A very, very scary Nurgle team. Okay, we're going to move on to the newer feature of the show, and it is the form guide, of course, just before we have a look at the fixtures. So, look at that, the Big Cups, 3 wins in their last 3 games now. Moving them right to the top of the form table, a perfect record across the last 3. Closely followed by Sabertooth Vadge 3.0, who've picked up 7 points now from their last 3 games, 2 wins and a draw. And then, remarkably really, so many of you are in such patchy form, and a win here, a loss there, that Sneaky Blinders have gone from being in the lower section last week to in the 3rd best form in the entire league this week. 2 draws and a win is the same as the Bloody Mary Queens, but this time Sneaky Blinders take it on the tie-break again, because their win was sort of genuine this week, whereas Soulforged was an admin win. Don't want to call it not a genuine win, but at the same time, Aromasin earned that on the field, whereas Soulforged earned that one from his opponent being unavailable this week. So Sneaky Blinders get that one on the tie-break there. So would you believe it? They've gone from being one of the 3rd worst teams in the division on form to one of the 3 best. And on the flip side of that, the Watch, you can see down there, who were right up in the top 3 of the form guide last week. Another defeat moves them all the way down into the bottom 3. And there are so many teams who have picked up either 3 points or 4 points across the last 3 weeks that losing the last 2 means that on the count back, the Watch end up in the bottom 3, unfortunately. So Sneaky Blinders and the Watch with a complete switch around in just the 1 week. You can also see Hack, Slash, and Mutilate down there. 2 points from their last 3 games. So things just about turning around slowly for Jonah after what's been a difficult start for him. And you can see Aaron Alphos down there at the very bottom with just the 1 point from their last 3 games. But of course, that most recent victory was an admin loss. Hopefully, we're going to see him back next week to try and improve that, because you don't want to be at the bottom of the form guide there. Okay, so again, we can't actually take a look at the league table this week because there's been a week 6 match played by the time I've got this one out. But what I can do is tell you how it looks, and hopefully by the next show I'm going to get some graphics in there so that we can have a proper look at the playoff chase. But it is the Big Cups leading the way. They have a 2-point lead at this stage. Their 4-0-1 record puts them 2 points clear of Sabertooth Vadge 3.0. So Juvasak and MB Carmack are leading the way. And the Dwarfs with the best touchdown difference in the whole division as well, with +5, going great guns. Of course, that 3-0 win in week 4 really helping to boost that up quite a bit. And with touchdown difference being the first tiebreaker, it's important to run up those extra touchdowns whenever you can. 3rd and 4th place at the moment are Lava Jackal and Soulforged. So Chosen of Papanurgle and the Bloody Mary Queen still undefeated, actually, with 2 wins and 3 draws. So 2-3-0 records there, but not quite good enough to be right at the top of the table. And then a bunch of teams in behind them on 7 points include Sneaky Blinders, Shock and Gore, Wonders Requiem, and the Watch, who are kind of in free fall at the moment. And it seems harsh to say after just 2 defeats on the spin, but so close is this division that Alzey has gone from 1st to 8th on the back of those 2 defeats and has a bit of work to do to climb back up the table. So let's see how he does. Here are your week 6 fixtures and announcement from the admin team that with it, of course, being the festive period now, Christmas and New Year coming up, this is a 2-week round. So you have one extra week to get your fixtures in. The round will roll not this week, but instead it'll roll on the 2nd of January. So you have until the 2nd of January to get these games played. One of them is already played, so Lava Jackal and Moondingo can put their feet up over the Christmas period. Nothing to worry about there. But here are your fixtures. So Bloody Mary Queens and the Watch. 2 draws and a win for Soulforged, who still is yet to lose this season. The Watch, all of a sudden, not in great form. And with a rookie Black Orc as opposed to a Block 1. Difficult to call. One of those games that could end up in a draw and will depend very much on how much damage the Orcs can do against their high elf opponents. But Bloody Mary Queens are coming along quite nicely, and they did manage to get more development this week from their admin win. They haven't taken that level yet, which is why we weren't able to look at it. But we might back the Bloody Mary the Bloody Mary Queens to keep up their good form and or their undefeated streak certainly, and maybe pick up a win here. But we don't want to see the Watch go for 3 defeats in a row, do we? So good luck to Alzir in that one. Chosen of Papanurgle and the Boondock Skinks is 3rd against 9th. A win and 2 draws for Lava Jackal. And the old mixed bag there for the Boondock Skinks. But a win most recently means they can go into this one with a little bit of confidence, but I don't think any Lizard team is going to go into a match against a Nurgle team that looks like this with any sort of confidence. I am aware of the result, so I'm not going to make a prediction for this one. And we'll move swiftly on to the battle between the bottom 2, Quiguanas and Hack/Mutilate. At this stage, definitely playing for pride. Quiguanas with 1 win and 2 losses from their last 2 games, and 2 draws and a defeat for Hack/Mutilate. Means they're still down there with the worst in the division in terms of their form over the last 3 games. But another opportunity to make amends. He'll have plenty of inducements to play with again, Will Jonah. Human linemen aren't all that expensive, so he's he can maybe afford Griff Oberwald, or he might opt to go the Wizard route. Didn't go Griff this week against the Nurgle, and again picking up that creditable draw, so nothing to fear here for Jonah, and maybe he can get that first win of the season to move himself up off the bottom of the table. Okay, next match is between 2 teams with identical records over the past 3 games, which I think might be the first time we've seen that actually. Sci-Fi Saurai and Erwender's Requiem are both loss-win-loss, and right in the middle of the table, with the Sci-Fi Saurai just ever so slightly towards the bottom end of that midfield group, but certainly not out of touching distance with the rest. 1 win would put them up to 7 points and tie them up with Erwender's Requiem, bring them right in amongst that gaggle of teams on 7 points at this stage. So plenty of incentive there for Cthulhu Collector to get his 2nd win of the season. Erwender, as I've said, you never quite know what you're going to get, do you? Just when you think he's putting together a good streak, another defeat turns up. And just when you think the wheels have fallen off, another victory turns up in a match you maybe didn't expect him to win. So that one, very, very difficult to call. And if I'm going to sit on the fence, probably a draw. Right, Shock and Gore have also turned it around last week with a win after 2 defeats for them. Avoiding the form guide bottom 3 on the basis that they won last week and the Watch lost. They take on Aaron Elfos, who were missing this week. We will assume that they'll return for this week, because otherwise it's a fairly easy prediction to make. But I still think I fancy the Undead here. They've got quite a bit of mighty blows to be thrown around in both of those mummies, and one of the whites, of course. And they do have tackle for dealing with those dodge players as well. They've got tackle on one of their whites, the mighty blow tackle white. So if Gruff can get himself another win, he'll be right up amongst the upper echelons of the table again. But it's one of those games, isn't it, where a draw certainly seems feasible. And if Aaron Elfos can pull out a victory, then it leaves both of them sort of marooned in that mid-table section. Alright, here's probably the fixture of the week, actually. The Big Cups in magnificent form of recent games. Wins in all of the last 3 games. Taking on Sneaky Blinders, still undefeated, and finally with a win to their name. But in all honesty, it would take a brave man to back a team of mainly stunty goblins against a bunch of dwarfs. So you've got to make Juvasak the hot favourite to make it 4 wins on the spin now against Sneaky Blinders. So it's been a very, very good start to the season for Aromasin. Still undefeated with that Underworld team. 1-4-0 is one of the stranger records you'll actually ever see. But if he does lose this, he'll end up with a symmetrical record. So it wouldn't be the end of the world. He has been talking about that this season. Whether he can produce one of those symmetrical records. So he'd be 1-4-1 if he was to lose. But hey, why not win the game and go 2-4-0 and put yourself in with a chance of those playoffs? So it's going to depend really for Aromasin on how that claw of his performs. He's sat at 14-10, so he's not going to get much in the way of inducements for this game. But he does have the one Claw Mighty Blow Skaven Blitzer in John Shelby, of course. And it is very much all down to him to start removing those dwarfs. Going to be about 100k in inducements for the Underworld. But I think the smart money is on a Dwarven victory here. Okay, finally, Hubat against Sabertooth Fadge. Very interesting game, that one. Every chance for the Vampires here, you have to say, because normally Elven teams are going to like to screen the ball rather than cage with it. And if there's one thing Vampires don't mind dealing with, it is a screen. Because, of course, Hypnotic Gaze can really come into play. So, Hubat's previous result against the Dark Elves was a draw. So, of course, difficult to read too much into that, how this one might go. But the interesting thing, of course, is that the Vampires don't have any sure hands on the team. And they might have an Agi-6 Blodge Vampire, but that is no good against a Strip Ball War Dancer, as long as that War Dancer manages to not roll a skull. So Pushkin, of course, that War Dancer, with Strip Ball, Tackle, and Mighty Blow, is a big threat to the Vampires here. They did manage to pick up a dirty player on their thralls, so there's potential for them to do quite a bit of damage to Sabertooth Fadge this week. But overall, you might fancy MB Carmack to pick up that good run of form and keep up the challenge to the Dwarfs at the top of the table. All right, folks, so that is going to be it for another episode of The Whole 9 Yards. I'm going to be back in 2 weeks' time. We've got a week off now. I'm going up to see the family for Christmas. So whatever you're doing yourselves, I hope you have a pleasant and peaceful festive period. It's been an absolute pleasure this year, bringing you all these recaps and streams and whatnot around Rebels. So I'll be back in the new year with the Week 6 recap. Get those fixtures played. You've got 2 weeks to do it, so no rush. But of course, by the time we're all back for to work and whatnot, I suppose, after the new year and the festive break, we'll need to see those games played, and then we'll be rocking on to Week 7. So we will see you then. Have a lovely Christmas and a very happy New Year to everyone as well.